Boris Johnson, he has faced his second day of grilling over at the COVID inquiry. Have you been following this? How interested in this topic are you? Are you one of those people that sit glued to the screen watching every single sentence that is uttered, every single WhatsApp message that is poured over while people start crying about the language used? Or are you someone that just says, pack it in, move on, life has progressed since then? Anyway, Boris Johnson today basically denied ever saying that he wanted to let the virus rip. He called Dominic Cummings. You remember that Barnard Castle trip, apparently, to test the eyesight? Boris Johnson admitted that was, I quote, a bad moment. And he said that he was desperate to keep schools open, apparently, and said that mass rule breaking within Downing Street was a million miles away from the truth. What do you make of this inquiry? I mean, this is a very long, drawn-out, convoluted, very expensive inquiry. Are you a fan of it?
No, a complete waste of money, waste of time. The only enjoyable aspects to it, I think, are the WhatsApp messages in which you discover a real great treasure trove for historians when they write about it. But everybody believes the other person is a C word, which of course is true actually in politics and also, by the way, in the executive suite, which is why it's called a C-suite.
Right.
But so I think it's a complete waste of money. And actually, we'd probably be better off if we let other countries do their research and then compiled our own version of it at the end of it without wasting everybody's time on this. I mean, the truth about the matter is that the KC there sees his role now as a minor sort of kind of TV celebrity. So he's lovely coiffured. But what I'd really like to know is actually if we did it a different way and got straight to it and said anybody over 60 can't go out, right? Everybody else can go about their job. And by the way, instead of spending 70 billion, if we'd only spent 10 billion, would we actually have the inflation we have today, which causes so much trouble for so many lives? So I am massively hostile to it. And actually, Boris, everybody thought they'd rip old Boris apart. He's too clever for this. All the politicians are too clever. Nobody can remember what happened before. And actually, they're very grateful that life has moved on.
All the politicians are too clever. I never thought I would hear that sentence during these political times. But anyway, Matthew.
The thing that I really want to know from this inquiry, and I don't know whether it will be able to deliver this answer or deliver it convincingly, is whether lockdowns were the right approach to this crisis, because there was huge disagreement. I think probably most people in the country broadly, as I did, supported them. But were they justified? Did more people die or suffer as a consequence of the lockdowns than were saved because of them? And what we're actually seeing at the moment is a he said, she said, really unseemly farce, where you get one senior minister or advisor saying something terrible about another, and then the same is said or similar is said in return. We all know what we think about Boris Johnson by now. We all know whether we think he handled the pandemic well or badly. I thought he handled it very badly. I thought he was cavalier in those opening weeks. What I want to know is what happens next time. Boris Johnson, very unlikely to be Prime Minister next time. What should we do if we have something similar again?
Yeah,
I tell you one thing we won't do. The idea that this judge who reports next year and then in 2 years after that, the full report, I think, in 26, right? What we won't be doing, and then there's another one. We'll say 20 years' time. That report will be gathering dust somewhere, and then suddenly we all start dying all over the place, and then we have another report after that. Well, why didn't we take any notice of the last report? These reports cannot deal with the unexpected. I mean, that is the reality of it. And I agree with you. I think in relation to Boris, he was a libertarian. He didn't want to do it. And it may, in the first instance, have cost some lives. But what definitely has cost this country dramatically is the 70 billion that went on people sitting on their fat backsides, being paid 80% of their money and doing nothing for 18 months. Our country has never recovered. Other countries have economically done better, and yet that's because Boris turned out to be more of a socialist than a conservative. It was shocking.
Part of what this inquiry is supposed to be looking into, one of its terms of reference, is the economic response, and therefore surely the economic impact. And I think it is really important for people like me, who are supportive of those lockdowns, to understand the full extent of the consequences. Can this inquiry deliver a plausible answer to that, I'm not sure. I'll just say one other thing. For those who lost loved ones in the pandemic, and there are many, many tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands perhaps, in this country who did, this is a very serious thing. And we can sort of be light-hearted about it at times, but actually a lot of people will be glued to it because they will associate it with the trauma of losing a mother or losing a father or a grandparent and so forth.
You see, I'm not light-hearted about it. What I actually think is that the focus is in all of the wrong areas because, you know, talking about was number 10 a toxic workplace, you know, did he call you this word? Who called who this swear word? None of those people will be in power again the next time there's a pandemic. So whether or not they were shouty managers or decent managers and hugged each other or alienated each other is quite frankly utterly irrelevant to the next pandemic going forward.
And also I think a corollary of that is that I don't particularly blame Boris Johnson for road testing ideas. We can all say things, I hope not the C word, but we can all say things or express views or test ideas out behind the scenes that we wouldn't want the public to know about. So if Boris Johnson clearly was thinking different things through before he then went and stood on the podium with government policy. I don't hold him accountable to what he was saying behind the scenes. What I hold him accountable for is his actual policy, his actual decisions. And on that, I think he failed miserably.
Right. So one of the problems you face when you have this huge thing happen, which had never happened before, is you're getting all kinds of different forms of advice. So, you know, Witt is saying one thing, Valence is saying something else, Hancock over there saying something else, Rabb is saying something over there. Actually, the idea that he is prepared to be flexible, to move around, actually, you'd want somebody to be flexible. And so I have no criticism of when your feet are put to the fire, that actually sometimes you are changing your mind over issues. And I don't see what the point is. And as for this KC, how much is he being paid? How much is this lot costing us? Why are we doing all this? And actually, do you know what? At the end of it, the report, when it comes out, it'll say something like there were a few mistakes and a few thousand people died, and that will
Kelvin
be it.
has a point here, Michelle, in that it is much easier for all three of us, and indeed people at home, to say, this is what he should have done, or this is what I would have done. Really? I'm a massive critic of Boris Johnson, but being Prime Minister of this country at a time of a pandemic is not an easy thing to do.
Yeah, I mean, I would say as well, I wouldn't mind the role of the media being evaluated as part of this inquiry as well. How was the media coverage managed? Because you said, oh, you know, most people were supporting lockdowns and all the rest of it. I think initially there was a cohort of people that absolutely categorically didn't support lockdowns right from day one. There was also a cohort of people that perhaps supported them initially and then started going, hang on a second, some have done stack up right, something is not quite right yet, or you started to see the consequences and effects of the consequences of the lockdowns and then didn't support them. My problem is many of those voices were completely alienated and shut down, mocked, ridiculed and almost cancelled if you dared to criticise the government.
You're 100% right. Actually, if you tried to go onto either YouTube or Twitter under the old ownership, right, not under the Elon Musk ownership, you went on there with anything which indicated that this was madness, you would get banned, you'd get kicked out. You couldn't say anything like that. I think GB News would probably be one of the few areas where such a debate might take place. But anything else, you were cancelled, and it could have a serious effect on your life and your career.
Of course, I would like to look as well about things like the vaccine mandates. Don't forget all those care workers as well. They all lost their jobs, didn't they? About 40,000 of them, was it, that didn't want to have those vaccines. That's the kind of thing that I would like to see explored. Mick says, Michelle, do you know what all those young people in the background of the inquiry with their laptops are doing? I must confess, I don't. I have also wondered that point myself.